The Winnipeg Jet adults seem to be doing pretty dang well, sitting pretty at 13-1-0. But how are the kids doing? Let's chat about that on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode is all about the Winnipeg Jets babies. We've done well at the senior level. The club is 13-1-0, and how about that? First in the league, 26 points banked, looking like a pretty good lock to make the playoffs at this point. The Jets would have to completely crash and burn in a way that we don't ever really see with this team to not make it. So vibes are good. Maybe it's a little bit more mixed for some of our younger prospects, though. It's not exactly been the smoothest ride for the Manitoba Moose. We'll chat about who's really stood out for the team and who maybe needs to pick it up a little bit in just a quick moment. But before we go any further, just wanted to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and be sure to use promo code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Now, for the Moose, obviously it's been not a great start. 3-5, second to last in the division. Things could be, better. But that doesn't mean that our prospects aren't doing well. Surprisingly, amidst all the struggles offensively, our young players, especially guys like Chibrikov and Lambert, continue to do pretty well. Chibrikov already at 7 points in 8 games, 3 goals and 4 assists. He is leading the team, only followed by Lambert at 6 points. Brad's got an assist and 5 assists and a goal. Both of them have really tried to carry some of the offensive load for this Moose team. Manitoba just not really getting a lot done this year. Pretty much across the board, guys like Shaw, Toninato, Janssen Fjallby, even Ford, these guys are all really top-end scorers at the AHL level, and none of them have really gotten going on a Moose offense that is just really struggling. So right now it's been a little bit rough, but I think it also kind of adds some context to the fact that Chibrikov and Lambert continue to do really well. Chibrikov, I feel like at some point this year will get a look. I think especially as we get closer to the trade deadline and the Jets are trying to determine what do we need, what should we spend assets on, and what can we, kind of source internally. Chibrikov might be an easy upgrade for the Jets' fourth line. The fourth line does a really good job of forechecking and being a two-way dominant force, but offensively, they don't score. That continues to be a problem. And so, net-wise, in terms of goals for and against, that line looks really bad, even though defensively they have generally dominated opponents. And so that's something that you could improve upon. Iafallo, Kupari and Barron have done an admirable job, but at some point you are going to have to add a little more finishing talent to make the most of what they do really well. They're only getting 10 minutes a night, so if you're only getting that much and you're still creating lots of stuff in the crease and slot, you might as well find somebody who can punch the puck home on a few more opportunities. But they aren't the only ones doing well. Elias Salomonsson, who I've really kind of kept a close eye on, has had a great start, 5 points in 7 games, and I really feel like the offensive side of his game blossoming is great news for the Jets. Winnipeg could use a really good two-way right-sided blue liner who can also be an offensive threat, somebody who can shoot well, who can pass well, who can help in transition. And Salomonsson in camp looked a very mature player, especially as camp wore on. The early first couple of games, you saw the timing and space being an issue against North American players. Less of a problem now, and the longer that he continues to play for the Moose, the more comfortable at this level he's going to get, and I don't think it's going to be very many seasons before he breaks into Winnipeg. It may even happen as soon as next year, pending what the Jets do with Pionk. I know that they love Neil, but he's also going to need a big contract, and I probably would not be giving it to him. I like Neil, and I think he's a great guy, and a very cool player to have in the right scenario, but probably not for what his next contract is likely to pace up to be. So Salomonsson might be the guy and might be worth bringing up in camp next year as somebody who could potentially replace Neal on that second pairing. It is a lot to ask of him, but, the Jets have gotten away with really good ELC coverage before on top of their veterans, and maybe this is a chance to go back to that model. Other players of note at the AHL level, obviously Chaz Lucius starting to work back in slowly. He's only played 3 games, had a couple of assists though, and he's one of those sleeper prospects that I'm keeping a close watch on for the long term. I know that he's a little on the older side, but I feel like you just want to be patient with him. Let him try and have a healthy year. He is still one of our most naturally skilled and talented shooters in the whole system. And he's really offensively brilliant. Anytime he gets into preseason and camp, I always come away like basically begging him to just have a full year. Even if he only misses a little bit of time, as long as he gets most of the season down, that's really all I want. He's very talented. He's an effortless skater, great shot, great passing, and he can play down the middle. All of that is stuff that the Jets could absolutely use in abundance. And, so long as his body holds together and he has a good year, maybe he even challenges for a spot next season. I don't want to overhype it and get too excited yet, but for him, just really rooting for him. If he goes the Gabriel Velarde route where, Velarde at one point looked like his career might not be that long, I think that would be great. Lucius has had to endure a lot of setbacks, and somehow he doesn't seem to have let it get to him. So rooting for him to have a full year. I desperately want him to hit. He's a very skilled, very, very talented young player, and somebody who I think for the Jets could be a really big sleeper boost to this Jets middle six at some point in the near future. Maybe he won't hit the heights that he once did before he started having all of these injury issues, but he can still be a big contributor at this level. Also of note in net, Milic and DiVincentis have kind of split so far. And I'll be honest, DiVincentis is kind of blowing Milic out of the water. DiVincentis is rocking a 941, a 1.78 goals against average, which, not everything again, but I think the save percentage is a much more impressive feat. And they've about played as many minutes as the other has. So, I don't want to read too much into it, but Milic at an 857, 4 games in for each, kind of not looking great for Milic, looking a little bit more like DiVincentis might be the real deal. And if the Jets are hoping for an internal cheap backup to sort of replace Comrie long-term, DiVincentis might be it. I don't know if he'll ever be a starter at the NHL level. It's a little early to tell that. And as I always say, goalies are voodoo. This is one of the areas where I just don't project because I frankly don't know. Goalies are always a little funky at the pro level, so I don't want to get too excited, but perhaps he becomes something for the Jets in the future. Let's just kind of let him cook in the Moose roster. It's not like Winnipeg is hard up to find a goalie at this point. Comrie is locked in for a bit. Hellebuck is locked up for the long term. So in terms of goalies, we're pretty set. We don't have to worry about that. But by the time DiVincentis maybe hits 25, 26, maybe he'll start getting a little more action here at the NHL level. But of course, that's the Moose roster. We've still got prospects elsewhere in college, even in the KHL. But next, I want to focus on our Canadian hockey, Canadian juniors kids. In the CHL, we've got OHL and WHL prospects, and for the most part, a lot of them have had pretty solid starts to the season. We'll chat about who's doing well and who maybe wants to ramp it up a little bit in just a little bit. But before we go any further, did want to shout out our friends and partners at Hims. Guys, ever feel like you need a little boost in the bedroom? It's time to stop worrying about your performance and get Hims, so you can feel confident knowing you can get hard and stay hard whenever you're in the mood. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. They provide access to a range of doctor-trusted ED treatments like chewable hard mints, Cialis, Viagra, and their generics for up to 95% cheaper. And you don't even have to worry about uncomfortable doctor's visits. It is 100% online. No awkward stigmatization, any of that kind of stuff. I know it's a lot of pressure, and sometimes you just feel awkward about it. It's not a fun conversation. Hims just wants you to feel as relaxed and natural and at your best. All you have to do is answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. There's no insurance needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. With hundreds of thousands of trusted subs, Hims can help you find the ED option that works for you. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See a website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. While we're at it, did also want to mention our friends and partners at Gametime. When it comes to buying tickets, a lot of us are used to, quite frankly, not having the best experience online. We all know that when you add a ticket to your cart, let's be real, right? It looks like a $30 ticket, and then it suddenly gets very expensive right after that. And we all hate hidden charges. Gametime does too. That's why they have an option that you can toggle that's all-in pricing, which shows you everything you need to know up front, right? Nobody wants to be surprised. They don't want to surprise you, and that's why they offer this option. They also come with a great new feature called Gametime Picks that filters out all the fluff to show you only the hottest deals on the best seats. And if you're wondering about the seat you're buying, they actually even show you a seat view, which is super convenient. You can find out if your view is obstructed and make sure that you're not spending money on a seat you're just not going to be happy with. And of course, they always come back with their lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, and so much more. Right now, Gametime is even offering an exclusive zone deal for the NHL Winter Classic event at Wrigley Field. Go to Gametime and purchase tickets to get up to 10% off bleacher seating and 20 to 25% off on home plate area seats. It's a great deal. It's a great price, and you can use Gametime for so many other great tickets. If you want to take the guesswork out of buying tickets, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Terms apply. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. Hey friends, and welcome back to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're chatting about some brief prospect updates. We just finished chatting about the Moose, who have kind of been a little not so great to start the year, but it is what it is. You know, the kids seem to still be finding their footing, and that's the most important part. Now, our OHL and WHL kids have had pretty interesting starts to the season. We have had some interesting updates from Kevin He's finally slowing down a little bit. He's not hitting like 2 points a game. All that said, he's still cooking at 23 points in 16 games, 12 goals, 11 assists. He is him. I know everyone kind of makes that joke, but I really feel like for a prospect who was drafted pretty late, and Winnipeg actually traded up to get him in the third round, relatively speaking late by top end prospect standards. He didn't look like a player that I think a lot of folks were expecting to be closer to a first round or maybe second round talent, but it seems like that offensive motor and engine that he has is absolutely powering him and his team to a really top end sitting in the OHL. His seeding is great. When I got a chance to talk to him, was really praiseworthy of his teammates and really put the team first. And I just thought that was really admirable. It seems like he's super grounded. And if there's a guy who I think at some point will wear a letter for the Jets on his chest, it's going to be Kevin. He's already captain of the Ice Dogs. Wouldn't shock me if he's an assistant captain at some point for Winnipeg, maybe even an actual captain. Who knows? You never want to count him out on that one. For Sudbury, we've got an interesting one in Walton. He's a player that I've kind of talked about before as being a little bit of a Tage Thompson-y type. Obviously, that's more stylistic than anything at this point, but he's got 19 points in 15 games, and it seems like he's getting more and more comfortable in his body, which is great because he's a super tall kid, very smooth skater, very good stick handling, and a very underrated offensive prospect. One of my favorite sort of sleeper picks in our pool, and right with him is Jacob Julian. He's got 10 points in 15 games. Not the best start for London this year. Not sure what's going on there. Haven't had a chance to check in on their games. I don't know if maybe London itself is just kind of trying to put 2 and 2 together. Maybe he's just having a little bit of a slower start, but hoping that he kind of turns it around, because like last year he was absolutely cooking for London and was tearing it up. Maybe extra responsibility this year is getting to him. I don't know, but to be honest, even if he doesn't have the best junior season, I came away with his camp being impressed. I thought he looked mature, defensively responsible, and so I already kind of project him into like a bottom 6 Jets role. I think he could become like Lowry-ish or maybe like a David Gustafson-y type. So I don't really worry about that too much, even if this OHL season doesn't have like crazy scoring numbers. Colby Barlo seems to be, finding a little bit more of a footing. I think he went pointless in like his first 5 games, so his record looks not great. But in his last 9 games, he's had 7 points, 4 goals, 3 assists. It does seem like he's starting to settle in a little more. I know that there was some concern about him. I've sort of talked about Barlo as for me, kind of needing to take the next step. I think he's got really interesting tools. I think, the deception and decision-making and timing are just things that he'll want to continue to get up to pro level. If he does really round it into form, he's got a unique shot that I just don't think the Jets really have many quite like. So I'm really rooting for him to do well at the pro level. We'll see how he does this year with Oshawa. I'm expecting him to have a much improved run in the season as he gets more used to Oshawa's systems and his teammates. I know the start was not great, but he's one of those players that because of his release and because of the leadership qualities and stuff and his work ethic, I just want to be patient with him. I don't want to judge too quickly. And I know some folks have kind of considered him maybe a prospect that you trade for a big rental. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but I also kind of wonder if it's worth just letting him marinate a bit and see what he becomes. The Jets don't have to like go crazy right now. I think that they should be active at the trade deadline, pending what this team looks like. But, it's not like they have to sell the farm for all that. So something to keep in mind. But elsewhere, Braden Yager continues to cook for Moose Jaw, 18 points in 13 games. Yager is a great goal scorer. He's, a pest around the net. And based on McGroarty not really doing much of anything for the WBS Pens, I do wonder if Pittsburgh would have done the trade differently. Yager is a natural center, a year younger or so, and he's really been doing well with Moose Jaw to the point where, McGroarty's lack of offensive production completely, I think, they were expecting him to be more pro ready, and he's just not. I think he could have stepped into a lineup at some point in a bottom 6 role. I think he thought he was further along and more ready for the NHL than he really is. But the Jets, I think, really made out like bandits, and swapping him for Yager seems to be paying off dividends. So Yager, I think, will be in the Jets lineup next year. I don't know what role he'll have, but I do think he makes the team. He looks good. Maybe he becomes your 2C long-term. We'll just have to wait and see, right? The jump from like 3C to 2C is really big. And with how the Jets run their second and third lines anyways, the distinction might not matter. It might just be like how they use them specifically in matchups. So I wouldn't focus on that so much. Elsewhere, we've got Conor Levis, 15 points in 13 games for Vancouver. Levis, I don't know that he's got like crazy offensive upside, but he's a very interesting player. I thought that he had really smart passing and vision. The only thing with him is that I kind of felt like in camp he wasn't like the fastest, and playing as a winger, I didn't really come away being wowed with his width play. So curious to know how he does, playing down the middle if he gets a chance to do that for Manitoba in the future. Again, kind of a player that I'm just kind of watching marinate. We have a lot of these sort of big, tall center types who are smooth skaters and who have some offensive punch. And I'm not like, I don't have like a solid read on where Levis sort of fits in that ranking. Right now, I think Julian and Walton might be a little closer, but Levis is a smart player and somebody who I hope at some point becomes a cool, depth player for the Jets. But Again, that may be a little bit farther in the future. Last player that you probably want to keep an eye on is Marcus Lopone. Lopone was one of those players that I didn't really have a read on coming into camp this year because there was almost no footage. Lopone, there were some Finnish national team junior videos and stuff, but you wouldn't really get a great feel for how he was. It wasn't until he came into camp and started showing some soft hands, some good skating, some nice work near the walls that you were kind of like, oh, okay, I kind of see why the Jets scouts liked him. Not that I doubt our scouts. I just wasn't seeing immediately in some of his shift by shift footage anything crazy. And it was just it was like a very small sample size to even work with. There's just not that much out there about him. Since joining Victoria, he's had 10 points in 15 games. For a guy coming from Finland, I think that's actually pretty nice. Lopane has not really been around the smaller ice where you're going to have less time and space to work with, but he has played in pro-ish systems. Obviously, he hasn't had pro level at the senior level yet for Karpat, but for Victoria, I'm hoping that he has a big year. He's a young player. He's got a lot of room to grow, and perhaps there's more to him than initially meets the eye. So he's, again, another guy that I might class as a bit of a sleeper. Very, very interesting player. Not a lot out there for him. I'll have to watch some of his footage back as we start getting more and more highlights. Very curious to know how he's, developing his release. That's something that I think a lot of people have talked about because he can get a lot of torque on his stick, and that could be a nice boost to have in your middle six. But he's probably a ways off, but hey, he's getting his first year in North America. He seems to be finding comfort level already, and I think that more than anything is probably the most positive sign. So, cautiously intrigued. We'll see how he does this year for Victoria. But of course, we actually do have a player in Finland right now. Somebody I haven't talked about in a very long time. We'll talk about this Finnish player and a few others who are playing either in the college ranks or abroad in just a quick moment. But before we go any further, did want to mention our friends and partners at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. Maybe you were watching, Baltimore versus Cincinnati, a crazy game. The officiating kind of ruined it at the end for me, but all the same, as a Ravens fan, I guess I can only be happy with the result. That was a crazy game, very back and forth, but maybe you're also a Vikings fan. You're hoping that they have some real special stuff with Darnold in store. I know that that's kind of been a crazy team to watch. Maybe people have called them frauds. Maybe you still have a lot of faith in them. Maybe you're getting a hunch in the middle of one of their games. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're placing your bets. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com to join today. Again, you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's all with FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Hey friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us as we are just wrapping up real quick with some last prospect updates from players abroad or perhaps in college. We're going to start off with one that I'm real interested in, a guy who, just this past draft class, I think stood out as a very exciting but still very raw young D prospect, Alphonse Frey. He's playing in the Allsvenskan, I think is how you pronounce it. Pretty high up in the Swedish tiers. As an 18-year-old prospect, 4 points in 13 games is actually very impressive. It's maybe not the most elite tier of hockey overseas, but for a young Swedish teenage prospect on the blue line, very curious to know what his role has become. I would imagine that he's sort of earning trust because he's a very exciting skater, very dynamic. That did stick out in the prospect and rookie camps. Very fun, obviously defensively still working on his two-way sense and everything. But if there's a kid who's been a volume producer and has a really aggressive approach, that actually reminds me, now that I think of it, kind of like a Neil Pionk below the face-off circles. Frey is one of those guys. I think he could be a really fun player. There's a lot of room for him to grow. Again, to translate it to the NHL will take some considerable work, but you've got years for him to figure that out. So as long as he keeps it up in Sweden, I think that's great. Eventually, we'll bring him over to North America and kind of go from there. Now, I mentioned a certain Finnish player I haven't talked about in a long time. Christian Vesalainen, who we technically still own the rights for, seems to be doing pretty well in Liga, 26 points in 21 games, including 11 goals. Obviously, he's 25 now, and he's spent a couple of years over there. But Vesalainen, I mean, I don't really know if he ever even wants to come back to North America. But if there ever was a way to get him back, maybe the coaching staff being more open-minded about how they would use him now could be beneficial. He was always a player who I think was a nice finisher and a smart poacher. But for some reason, the Jets tried to make him into a power forward. And I just don't think that was ever really, the kind of game that he played. I think because of his size, people assume that he was like physical Blake Wheelery type. And I just don't think that was ever really his game. I don't know if he's interested in coming back. He's probably settled at this point. And he's doing pretty well for HIFK. So, if he stays over there, all the best to him. But should he have an interest in returning, I would be interested to see what he's like. At this age, it's kind of like it might be hard to make that transition. But any way that you can boost your middle six scoring and skill and talent, I think is worth a legit look. So just something to keep in mind. He's out there. It's not completely done and dusted. Maybe one day he comes back and sort of gets back in the Jets ranks. Last couple of guys we'll talk about. Zach Nearing has been doing pretty well for Western Michigan starting off. Nearing, I think, did have some injury stuff before that kind of held him back in previous stuff, but seems to be doing pretty well now. He's a big, tall winger, pretty decent shot. I think when he was drafted, most of us sort of just shrugged at the time, but it seems like Nearing does have some really good offensive chops. 3 goals, a couple of assists already, and I think he's just kind of looking to have a full season, kind of get up to speed. He did play for Sioux Falls last year and put up not crazy numbers, but if he continues to grow and sort of develop into an interesting maybe depth scorer, I think that would probably be the better option. Maybe he can kind of pick up where Torgerson maybe wasn't able to translate those offensive tools to the NHL level. I don't know that Nearing really projects to be more than like a third liner, but hey, having extra sizable prospects who skate well, I think really isn't the worst thing, especially somebody who can use his frame well and essentially be a guy who can kind of drive towards the net. I'm hoping that's what Nearing game starts to develop into, but we'll just see. Again, he's really just getting his first taste of college action. Probably would be a while before we even see any sort of pro development. Last guy worth keeping an eye on for University of Denver, Garrett Brown. Garrett is a very, very smart defender, two-way defender with, a very strong frame. I kind of hope that he can become maybe, another sort of, maybe a faster Dylan Sandberg, somebody who's better in transition. Dylan's already pretty good at that sort of stuff, but, I think Garrett's one of those guys who's more comfortable in possession of the puck. So very interesting player, a guy who had a short season last year thanks to injuries, finally getting up to speed this year, and hopefully, that continues to contribute to his confidence. He doesn't have any points in 7 games, but I think the biggest thing for him is just getting used to being sort of a puck-moving defender, maybe somebody who can help lead breakouts and stuff, and could be a really interesting player for the Moose in the near future, especially, once he starts to wrap down his collegiate career and maybe gets ready to graduate to the pro levels. He's a right-sided D, and the Jets don't have loads of that, so if he can become a good two-way puck mover for maybe your third pairing, I think that would be pretty darn fantastic. But curious to know if any of you have had the chance to watch him. If you have, drop your thoughts below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's episode, though, that's going to be all the time that we have. Obviously, next week we'll have coverage of Winnipeg versus Dallas to open the week, and then hopefully I get to talk about a win because the following games on the road, It's going to be a tough stretch ahead, and the Jets are really going to be tested for all their worth. So let's hope that the Jets continue to do what they've been doing and bank those points. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We'll see you here next week, so see you then. Have a great night, and as always, go Jets go.